Who taught you to silence your soul? The question rolled through the royal hall like thunder held behind glass, low enough to make every candle tremble, soft enough that only the guilty seemed to breathe. Emily Harper stood at the end of the Omega line with her eyes lowered, her pale hands folded so tightly in front of her white dress that her knuckles had gone cold. Around her, the moon bell still hummed from its silver frame, sending thin waves of sound across the marble floor. Every unmated Omega in Silverpine pack had revealed something when that bell rang. Brienne Nicole, standing near the front in a gown the color of champagne, had filled the air with sugared pear and triumph. But Emily had given the room nothing. No sweetness, no warmth, no trace for any wolf to follow. She had swallowed the last of the ashroot before entering the hall, bitter gray drops that burned her tongue and numbed the back of her throat. For 12 years, that bitter root had kept her alive. It made her forgettable, uninteresting, almost invisible. A dead-scent Omega, they called her. A girl with no call in her skin, no music in her blood, no future waiting under the moon. Emily had learned to accept their laughter because laughter was safer than hunger, safer than curiosity, safer than the terrible night her stepmother had gripped her shoulders and whispered that if anyone ever discovered what she truly was, they would come for her. So Emily had practiced disappearing. And tonight, in front of the Alpha King himself, she had almost survived by being nothing at all. Almost. King Adrian Blackwood sat on the obsidian chair beneath the great stained-glass moon, dressed in black formal leather and a long coat lined with silver thread. He was controlled, still, and terrifying because of it. His pale face was calm, his silver-gray eyes half-lowered, his body unmoving as if the whole room were a forest and every person inside it had become prey to his listening. They said he did not hunt by scent anymore. They said a curse from the Northern Wars had taken that gift and left him with something worse. He could hear a lie before it reached the tongue. He could hear fear hiding beneath a smile. He could hear a heartbeat shift from loyalty to betrayal across a room of 500 wolves. Emily had told herself those were only royal rumors. Then his head turned, not toward Brianna, not toward the noble Omegas gleaming under moonlight, toward the shadowed end of the line, where Emily stood holding her breath. The king rose, and the hall forgot how to move. His boots touched the marble with a quiet certainty that made Emily's pulse stumble. One step, then another. The ashroot in her veins felt suddenly thin, useless, like paper held against a storm. Brianna's smile faltered. The elders stiffened. Emily wanted to step back, but there was nowhere to go. Behind her, the doors had closed. Before her, the Alpha King stopped close enough that she could see the faint scar near his left eyebrow and the strange weariness behind his eyes. He did not reach for her. He did not command her to kneel. He only tilted his head, listening to something Emily had spent half her life trying to bury. "You have no scent," he said quietly. The room waited for shame to fall on her. Emily forced her voice to come out steady. "Yes, Your Majesty." His gaze sharpened, not cruelly, but with a recognition that frightened her more than anger ever could. "Then why," he asked, "is your soul the loudest thing in this room?" Emily could not answer him, because the moment King Adrian Blackwood spoke those words, the royal hall vanished from her mind, and Silverpine became a small house at the edge of the woods again, with frost on the windows and ashroot drying in bundles above the stove. She was 8 years old the first time Helen Harper told her to stop breathing so loudly. It was because Emily had woken from a dream with a strange sweetness in the air, something soft as moonlit cream and sharp as winter berries, and every wolf in the house had turned toward her bedroom door at once. Helen had rushed in with a bowl of crushed gray leaves, her pale face tight with fear. She had pressed the paste under Emily's wrists, behind her ears, along the hollow of her throat, whispering the same warning over and over until the words became a wall inside the child's heart. Do not let them notice. You. Do not let them want to know what you are. Do not let your scent out. Not for joy, not for fear, not even for pain. From that night forward, Emily learned survival in quiet pieces. She learned that floorboards spoke if you stepped on the center, so she walked along the edges. She learned that laughter carried farther than tears, so she swallowed both. She learned that a girl could become so useful no one questioned why she was always there, and so forgettable no one cared when she disappeared. By 17, the other Omegas had begun to bloom into their scents, filling the training fields with vanilla, pine, lavender, amber, and rainwater, while Emily smelled only of ashroot and soap. The pack decided what that meant before she could defend herself. Empty Omega. Dead scent girl. Poor little nothing. Brianna Cole had been the first to say it where everyone could hear. An Omega without a scent is like a song without a voice, Brianna had said. Pretty sad, but useless at a ceremony. Everyone had laughed, and Emily had lowered her eyes because shame was safer when it passed through you without resistance. Only her grandmother Margaret had ever looked at her as if the silence around her was not emptiness, but a locked door. Margaret lived in a blue cottage 2 miles beyond the main road, where the trees grew close and the wind smelled like sage. Whenever Emily could slip away, she went there, and Margaret would wash the ashroot from her skin with warm water and gentle hands. "You are not broken," she would whisper. "You are hidden. There is a difference." But Margaret knew old stories, older than Silverpine, older than the royal court. She spoke of moon soul omegas, rare girls born with a scent that did not call to the body, but to the wounded places inside a wolf. Most packs feared what they could not command. Most kings desired what they could not possess. But one kind of alpha, Margaret said, would not need scent at all. A king marked by sound would hear the truth beneath every silence. Emily remembered asking what would happen if such a king found her. Margaret had gone still, her hand resting over Emily's. "Then pray he is lonely enough to be merciful," she had said. Now, standing beneath the stained glass moon with Adrian Blackwood watching her as if every hidden year had finally made a sound, Emily understood why her grandmother had been afraid. The memory broke when Brianna Cole laughed softly from the front of the Omega line, not loud enough to be called disrespectful, but sharp enough to remind Emily that the whole hall was watching. "Your Majesty," Brianna said, dipping into a perfect curtsy. Perhaps the bell is confused by her. It happens with defective things. Someone near the west pillars whispered dead scent, and the word traveled through the crowd like a cold draft under a door. Emily kept her chin lowered, but her cheeks warmed with a shame so familiar it almost felt like home. King Adrian did not look away from her. Earlier that evening, before the bell, before the king's impossible question, Emily had stood in the servants' corridor with Helen Harper tightening the faded ribbon at the back of her white dress. Helen's fingers had moved fast and hard, not from kindness, but from fear. One ceremony, Helen had whispered near Emily's ear. "You stand last. You speak only if spoken to. You do not smile. You do not cry. Most of all, you do not let that root wear off." Emily had swallowed against the bitter numbness coating her tongue. Then Brianna had appeared at the corridor entrance in satin and pearls, carrying a crystal glass filled with silver wine. She had looked Emily over slowly, from the old dress to the plain shoes polished by hand. "How brave," Brianna had said, "wearing white when you have nothing to offer the moon." Emily had tried to step around her. Brianna had stepped too. The wine spilled in a bright stream down Emily's sleeve and across the front of her dress, cold as creek water in November. "Go back," Helen hissed. "Change into something darker." But the royal horns sounded before Emily could move, 3 deep notes rolling through Silverpine Hall. The king had arrived. There had been no time to change, no time to hide the stain, no time to do anything but walk into the great room with her damp sleeve clinging to her wrist and every eye measuring her worth. Now, under the stained glass moon, that humiliation still marked her like a public sentence. Brianna turned toward the crowd with practiced sadness. "Poor Emily has always struggled with presentation," she said. "Some Omegas simply were not made for royal attention." The laughter rose again, softer this time because the king was standing, but still cruel enough to make Emily's fingers tremble. Then Adrian lifted one hand. Silence fell instantly. He glanced toward the moon bell. Still humming in its silver arch, "Ring it again," he ordered. The elder beside the bell went pale. "Your Majesty, the ritual has already been completed." "Again," Adrian said. The elder raised the small silver hammer and struck the bell a second time. The note that followed was thinner than before, higher, almost painful, sliding beneath Emily's skin like winter light. Around the hall, scents stirred and strengthened. Brianna's sugared pear bloomed brighter. Cedar, rose, amber, rain, and vanilla braided together until the air felt crowded. Emily felt nothing from herself. Only the ashroot, bitter and cold. Then the candles nearest her went out. One by one, not blown by wind, but dimmed by something unseen. The darkness circled Emily like a secret recognizing its own name. The crowd stepped back. Brianna stopped smiling. And in that sudden hush, from somewhere near the lower tables, a child's frightened breath caught, small and sharp, and almost lost beneath the ringing bell. Emily heard it. So did the king. Emily turned before she thought, before fear could remind her that every eye in the room was already on her. A little boy had slipped during the sudden darkness, his small hand caught in the folds of a fallen table runner as frightened guests stepped back from the extinguished candles. Now his breath hitched again, thin and panicked, and the crowd around him did what crowds always did when shame was safer than courage. They stared. Emily moved. Someone whispered her name in warning. Helen's voice cut through the dark from the side aisle. Emily, stay where you are. But the child made that small, frightened sound again, and the order lost all power over her. Emily gathered her damp skirt in both hands and crossed the marble floor, not gracefully, not like Brianna would have, but fast enough that her plain shoes slid once on the polished stone. A nobleman stepped back without looking and knocked a tray from a servant's hands. Noah tried to pull away and only frightened himself more. Emily dropped to her knees beside him. Easy, she whispered. Do not fight the cloth. It is only wrapped around you, that is all. His lower lip trembled. I cannot get out. Yes, you can. I am right here. She worked carefully, loosening the twisted runner from his wrist, shielding him with her own body as more guests stumbled in the confusion. A sharp piece of crystal pressed through her sleeve, and a quick sting opened along her forearm, but Emily barely noticed. Noah noticed. His eyes filled with tears. You are hurt. Emily shook her head and gave him the gentlest smile she could manage. It is nothing. Listen to me instead. She did not know why she began to hum. Emily had not sung it aloud in years. She only let it pass through closed lips, soft and low, a thread of comfort meant for one scared child and no one else. Noah's breathing slowed. His fingers loosened around the charm. Emily freed the boy's hand and guided him out from beneath the table, brushing dust from his small jacket. There, she murmured, brave as any wolf in Silverpine. Noah looked at her with open wonder, as if no one had ever called him brave before. Behind them, the last candle went dark. For one suspended heartbeat, the hall became all moonlight and silence. Then King Adrian Blackwood spoke from several feet away. His voice changed in a way Emily did not understand. That song, he said. Emily froze, still kneeling beside the child. Slowly, she looked over her shoulder. Adrian stood at the edge of the dim circle surrounding her, his silver-gray eyes fixed not on her stained dress, not on the thin line of red near her sleeve, but on her mouth, as if the last note had left a visible mark in the air. Brianna stepped forward quickly, trying to reclaim the room. Your Majesty, she said, it was only a servant's tune. A little trick to gather sympathy. Adrian lifted his eyes to Brianna, and she stopped speaking at once. No, he said softly. That was not a trick. Then his gaze returned to Emily, and the darkness around the extinguished candles seemed to draw closer, not threatening, but waiting. Emily's heart beat so loudly she feared even ordinary wolves could hear it now. Adrian took one careful step toward her. I have heard that melody only once before, he said, in a dream that kept my wolf from losing himself. Emily stood so quickly that Noah's wooden charm slipped from his hand and clicked against the marble. Emily's breath shortened as the truth pressed in around her. The lullaby had betrayed her more completely than any scent ever could. She had spent 12 years hiding what wolves could smell, but no one had ever warned her that a song could carry the shape of a soul. Noah reached for her skirt, trusting her without understanding the danger, and that small gesture nearly broke her. She gently placed his charm back into his palm and whispered, Go to your mother now. He hesitated. Miss Emily, please. Her voice was calm only because panic had gone too deep to shake. Noah obeyed, running toward the baker's wife, who pulled him close with tearful thanks that Emily barely heard. The hall had shifted. King Adrian took another step toward her. No guards moved until he lifted 2 fingers. Then the royal soldiers at the doors closed ranks, not drawing weapons, not threatening anyone, simply making it clear that no one would leave without the king's permission. Emily's mind turned cold. Locked doors. Watching eyes. Helen's old warning blooming like poison in her memory. The moment they know what you are, they will never let you go. Adrian's voice lowered. Emily Harper, come here. He knew her name. She had never given it to him. The room seemed to tilt. Emily took one step back. Adrian stopped immediately, as if he had heard the fear before her foot touched the floor. I am not going to hurt you, he said. Every person in the hall heard a king's promise. Emily heard something else beneath it, something strained and lonely, something that made his stillness look less like power and more like control held with both hands. But fear was older than pity. Fear knew how to run. She moved before anyone understood she meant to. Her skirt flashed white through the darkness. Someone gasped. Brianna cried out that she was escaping. Helen said Emily's name in a voice that sounded almost desperate. Adrian did not shout. He only turned his head slightly, listening. Emily reached the servant door and slipped through, pulling it shut behind her. Her shoes whispered over the floor as she hurried past storage rooms and winter coats. Her wounded sleeve pressed close to her side. Behind her, the door opened. Not slammed. Opened. That was worse. No hurried footsteps followed. No barking orders. Only Adrian's calm voice traveling through the corridor like he was already beside her. You favor your left foot when you are afraid. Emily's heart leaped. She turned sharply down the west passage, toward the old bell tower. She did not know why she went there, except that it led upward, away from locked doors and crowded rooms, and the king who could hear what she tried to hide. The stairs were narrow, spiraling through stone, chilled by the mountain wind. Halfway up, she paused with one hand against the wall, forcing herself not to breathe too hard. For a moment, there was silence. Then, from below, Adrian spoke again, softer this time. Ashroot can cover scent, little Omega. It cannot quiet a heart that is begging to be found. Emily closed her eyes. She had been found. And somehow, that felt less like capture than the beginning of a truth she was not ready to face. Emily climbed until the music of the hall became a memory beneath the stone. The bell tower had been abandoned for years, left standing above Silverpine Hall like an old bone against the mountain sky. Wind slipped through narrow windows and carried the scent of snow from the ridge, clean and cold enough to sting her lungs. The great bell hung above her in the darkness, silent now, its silver surface dulled by dust and moonlight. Emily pressed one hand to her side and tried to slow her breathing. Every instinct told her to keep moving, to find the narrow maintenance door that opened onto the outer stair, to disappear into the forest before the ashroot faded. But her legs trembled, and the cut along her forearm pulsed beneath her torn sleeve. She told herself it did not matter. Pain was only a sound the body made when it wanted attention, and Emily had survived by giving herself none. Below, a step touched stone. Then another. Not rushed. Not uncertain. Adrian was coming up after her with the patience of someone who did not need to chase, because the world itself carried messages to him. Emily moved higher, toward the wooden landing beneath the bell, but an old beam shifted under her weight with a tired groan. She froze. Across the landing, a young royal guard appeared from the opposite stair, breathless and wide-eyed, clearly sent to block the upper exit before she reached it. He lifted both hands as if to calm her. Miss Harper, please, the king only wants to speak with you. Emily backed away. I cannot go back down there. The guard stepped closer, and the boards beneath him gave a sharp warning crack. His face changed. Emily heard the sound before the wood fully split, a dry snap hidden beneath the wind. She could have run. For one bright second, escape opened before her like a door. If she let him stumble, if she used the confusion, she might make it to the outer stair and vanish into the pines. No one would call that cruelty. Not from a frightened Omega. Not after the way the hall had laughed. But the guard was young. Younger than she had first thought, with a dusting of freckles across his nose and fear caught in his throat. Emily reached him before she made the choice. She caught his sleeve and pulled him back just as the old board dropped loose and clattered harmlessly onto the lower beams. The guard stared at the empty space where his foot had been, then at her. You saved me, he whispered. Emily released him quickly, almost ashamed of the proof that she could not stop caring even when caring ruined everything. Go down slowly, she said. Step on the stones, not the wood. He nodded and retreated, shaken but safe. Only then did Emily turn and find Adrian standing 3 steps below the landing. He had seen it all. The moonlight carved his pale features into silence, and for the first time, he looked less like a king judging her and more like a man recognizing something he had not expected to find. Emily's voice broke despite her effort to hold it steady. Please do not look at me like that. Like what? Like I am something good. Adrian climbed the last steps, slow enough not to corner her, careful enough that she noticed. You had a chance to escape, he said. You chose to protect a stranger. I chose not to let someone fall. That is not special. In my court, he answered quietly, it is rare. The words settled between them with the dust and moonlight. Emily looked away first. Beyond the narrow window, the forest stretched black and silver for miles, promising hiding places she no longer trusted. My stepmother says my scent brings ruin, she whispered. She says things come for me when it gets out. Wolves. Shadows. Men who want power. Adrian's expression tightened, but his voice stayed gentle. Helen Harper taught you fear because fear made you obedient. You do not know that. I hear what people become when they lie, Emily. Her lies have teeth. The wind moved through the tower, and somewhere below, voices called faintly from the hall. Emily hugged her wounded arm close. If I am not cursed, then why did my family die after my scent first appeared? Adrian's stillness changed. Not surprise. Recognition. As if a missing piece had finally turned in the lock. Before he could answer, the great bell above them gave a low, impossible hum though no hand had touched it. Emily felt the ashroot in her blood falter. Warmth rose beneath her skin, soft and luminous, carrying the first trace of what she had buried for 12 years. Adrian stepped closer, his eyes darkening with awe and warning. Emily, he said, do not be afraid of what answers you back. The warmth under Emily's skin did not rush out like danger. If she could hold it back. I cannot, she whispered. I cannot let it out. Adrian remained a few feet away, close enough to protect her, far enough to prove he would not force her. His voice moved through the humming tower with careful steadiness. You are not calling ruin, Emily. You are calling what is wounded. That is why frightened things found you. That is why lost wolves came near your home. Her eyes burned. No. Helen said they came because I was wrong. She said my parents died because I smelled like something the dark wanted. Adrian's jaw tightened at Helen's name. Your parents did not die because of you. The words were quiet, but they landed with the weight of a royal seal. Emily shook her head, suddenly more afraid of hope than she had ever been of shame. You cannot know that. I can. He reached inside his coat and drew out a small silver pendant on a broken chain. The metal was old, shaped like a crescent moon wrapped around a pine needle. Emily's breath caught. She knew it, not from memory, but from the painting Margaret kept hidden above her fireplace, the one of Emily's mother wearing that very pendant while holding a baby wrapped in white wool. Adrian held it out on his open palm. This was found 12 years ago near the northern road, he said. My scouts believed it belonged to a woman from Silverpine who tried to flee with her child. The report was buried before it reached me. Buried by whom? Emily asked, though some part of her already knew the answer would hurt. Adrian's eyes lifted toward the lower halls. By someone inside my own council. Someone who wanted the story forgotten. The bell hummed again, and the tower seemed to breathe around them. Emily stared at the pendant, every old certainty slipping loose. My stepmother told everyone my parents were careless, that they drew wild wolves to our house. Adrian's voice softened. Your parents were protecting you. Your mother knew what you carried. Moonsoul Omegas are rare because they do not strengthen a throne by fear. They steady it by truth. A corrupt alpha cannot bear standing near one for long. Your presence makes hidden things restless. Lies grow louder. Curses answer. Broken wolves remember what they were before pain taught them rage. Emily thought of Helen's fear, Brianna's cruelty, the way candles died when the bell rang, the way Adrian had heard her without needing scent. She wanted to reject it all. She wanted to be simple, ordinary, forgettable Emily Harper again. But the warmth continued to rise, soft and bright, and the old bell answered with a low silver note that made dust tremble in the rafters. Below them, a distant voice called for the king. Another voice, sharper and colder, cut through the hall beneath the tower. Lord Marcus Vale had arrived. Adrian went very still. Emily saw the change in him before he spoke, the tightening of control, the shadow of an old burden crossing his face. Marcus, she said, remembering the royal advisor from the dais, the man whose smile had never reached his eyes. Adrian turned toward the stairwell. He was the one who signed the old report. At the same moment, the bell gave one final ringing pulse, and every lantern in the tower flared white. From below, Marcus Vale's voice rose clear and commanding. "Seize the girl. She is not an Omega. She is a soul thief." For 1 second, the tower held its breath. Emily looked toward the stairs, where Marcus Vale's accusation rose again from below, polished and poisonous enough to make fear sound like law. "Soul thief." The word struck the stone walls and came back changed, larger, darker, carrying every childhood warning Helen had ever planted in her heart. Adrian moved first, not toward Emily, but between her and the stairwell. His black coat shifted with the mountain wind, and the silver thread at his shoulders caught the lantern flare like frost. "No one seizes her," he said. The words were quiet, yet they traveled down through the tower with the certainty of a command carved into iron. Below, voices faltered. Emily should have felt safe. Instead, panic twisted tighter inside her. A king's protection could become a cage, as easily as a prison could wear velvet. Marcus was already waiting when Adrian guided her back down into the royal hall, not touching her, only walking beside her as the crowd parted. The candles had been relit, but their flames leaned away from the center of the room, as if the air itself distrusted what was about to happen. Marcus Vale stood beneath the stained-glass moon in robes of deep blue, his white hair smooth, his face arranged in sorrowful authority. Behind him, Helen Harper clutched a handkerchief to her chest, and Brianna stood near the Omega line with triumph slowly returning to her eyes. "Your Majesty," Marcus said, bowing just enough to look respectful and not enough to seem afraid. "You have been deceived. That girl carries an illegal soul call. Her kind attaches itself to powerful alphas and weakens them from within." Emily stopped walking. Her voice came out small, but clear. "I have never taken anything from anyone." Marcus turned to the crowd as if she had proven his point by speaking. "They always say that. They hide behind innocence, behind softness, behind tears. Ask her why she buried her scent. Ask her why candles died at the bell. Ask her why your curse answered her voice." A murmur moved through the hall. Emily felt it brush against her skin like cold rain. She wanted to explain, but every explanation sounded impossible, and impossible girls were rarely believed. Helen stepped forward then, and Emily's chest tightened. "I tried to protect this pack," Helen said, her voice trembling in all the right places. "I took that child in after tragedy marked her. I gave her root to keep her nature contained. If I seemed harsh, it was only because I feared this very night." Emily stared at her stepmother. For years, she had mistaken Helen's fear for proof that she herself was dangerous. Now, hearing the smoothness beneath the trembling, she understood what Adrian meant. Some lies did have teeth. Adrian looked at Helen for a long moment. Then he looked at Marcus. The hall went still. "I will ask once," he said. "Who ordered the report about Emily's family buried?" Marcus gave a controlled smile. "Old records are often misplaced, Your Majesty." That was not an answer. It was the sound of a lock closing. Adrian tilted his head, listening past the words. Marcus's pulse shifted. Helen's fingers tightened around the handkerchief. Brianna stopped smiling. Emily heard none of those things, but she saw them reflected in Adrian's eyes. He stepped down from the dais, crossed the open floor, and stopped before Emily. For a terrible heartbeat, she thought he was going to announce judgment. Instead, the Alpha King lowered himself to one knee before her. Gasps broke across the room. Emily could not move. Adrian reached not for her hand, but for the thin strip of ceremonial silver ribbon an elder had tied loosely around her wrist after Marcus's accusation, a symbol that marked her as suspect. With careful fingers, he untied it and let it fall to the marble. "She is not cursed," he said, his voice carrying to every corner of Silverpine Hall. "She is not a thief. She is the only soul in this room that has never lied to me." Emily's breath caught so sharply it almost hurt. Adrian rose and turned to face the pack, placing himself at her side instead of above her. "From this moment forward, any charge against Emily Harper is a charge before the crown." Marcus's expression hardened by the smallest degree, but Emily saw it. So did Adrian. The king's gaze sharpened like winter moonlight. "And before this night ends," he said, "the truth you buried will answer out loud." Marcus Vale smiled as if the king had offered him a game he had already won. "Your Majesty," he said, "truth requires evidence, not sentiment. Then let truth choose its own witness, Adrian answered. He turned toward the moon bell and lifted one hand. No elder moved. No hammer struck. Yet the bell answered him with a single low note that rolled across Silverpine Hall and sank beneath every whisper. Emily felt it pass through her chest, not painfully, but deeply, as if some locked room inside her had finally opened. The warmth beneath her skin rose again, soft as dawn through winter curtains. She looked at Adrian, frightened that she might lose control, but he did not command her. He only stood beside her, steady and quiet, allowing her the choice no one had ever given her before. Emily closed her eyes and let herself breathe. For the first time in 12 years, she did not swallow the air back down. She did not search for ashroot. She did not apologize for existing. The hidden part of her unfolded into the hall, not as a scent meant to tempt or conquer, but as a gentle presence that made every candle flame turn silver. Across the room, people stopped murmuring. Some began to weep without knowing why. Noah Reed reached for his mother's hand. Brianna lowered her eyes. Helen made a small broken sound and stepped back as if the truth had found her shadow. Marcus tried to laugh, but the sound failed him. The bell rang again, and from beneath his robes, a black seal slipped free on a chain around his neck, glowing with the same cold mark Emily had once seen burned into an old chest in Helen's attic. Adrian saw it. So did the elders. The royal advisor's face lost its careful sorrow. That seal, Adrian said, belonged to the faction that ambushed the northern road 12 years ago. Marcus's smile thinned. You needed a bride who could quiet your curse, he said, his voice losing its polish. I needed a kingdom that would not fall to a king ruled by shadows. Her family would have hidden her from us all. They were going to take her to sanctuary. Because she was a child, Adrian said. Because she was power-wasted in poverty, Marcus snapped. Emily heard the room draw in a shocked breath, but she felt strangely calm. Not empty. Not weak. Calm. Helen began to cry then, confessing in scattered pieces that Marcus had paid her to keep Emily frightened, hidden, and dependent on the root. Brianna looked at her mother as if the floor had vanished beneath their family name. The guards moved at Adrian's signal, and Marcus did not resist. Perhaps he knew the hall had heard enough. Perhaps, for the first time, his lies had nowhere left to stand. But as he was escorted toward the doors, the curse inside Adrian answered the silver light. The candles bent backward. The great stained glass moon shivered above the throne. Adrian staggered one step, pressing a hand to his chest, his control cracking in silence rather than fury. Emily turned to him at once. The room blurred away. There was only the king who had heard her when she was trying to disappear, the man whose soul sounded lonelier than power should ever sound. Emily approached slowly, giving him the same care he had given her in the tower. Follow my voice, she whispered. Adrian's silver-gray eyes found hers through the darkened air. I am here, she said, and began the lullaby again. The melody was barely more than breath, but it steadied the shadows around him. His shoulders lowered. The strained lines of his face softened. The curse did not vanish like magic in a storybook. It loosened, quieted, remembered it did not own him. When the last note faded, Adrian stood before her not as a monster from rumor, not as an untouchable king, but as a man returned to himself. He looked at Emily with something deeper than victory. She expected him to claim her before the pack. Instead, he bowed his head. You owe me nothing, he said. Emily's heart trembled at the freedom in those words. Then why did you say you wanted my soul? Adrian's gaze lifted, gentle and unguarded. Not to take it, Emily Harper. To anchor mine, if you choose to let me. The hall remained silent, but it was no longer the silence of fear. It was the silence after a storm, when the whole world waits to see what will grow from the ground it tried to break. Emily looked at the fallen ashroot vial near her feet, then stepped over it and offered him her hand.